month wrap up. So I wanted to go over the total of number of books read. Now this month, I would say the ones that I finished were 11 books, and I ended up having 8 DNFs this month. So for the second half of the month, I ended up delving into Recollection. This is Noelle Adams. This is the Worthings series. It's basically a family that they're basically, they come from like billionaires. And so they have like, they've inherited money, and now they're basically trying to, you know, keep the money flowing, obviously, you know. If you're not being smart with your money and like putting it in investments and things like that, you know, you can go broke. I mean, people could be like generational wealth, but I'm like, yeah, but you have to be smart with that wealth, you know, because, I mean, look at people who go and win the lottery, and then you end up seeing that they're broke again because they took that money and they didn't invest it. They didn't like use it smartly. They ended up using it to the point of like they spent all the money, you know? So that's why you have to be smart with your money. So that's basically what they're trying to do, is they're trying to obviously use their money in a way to do some, what's it called? Like, I can't remember the name of it, but like, you know, like sort of like a charity. Like they want to do good with their money, but they also want to use their money in a way to where, you know, they can keep the money flowing, you know? So they're trying to be smart, but also, you know, like I said, still do good things with it too, you know? So seems like billionaires who are trying to do good in the world, you know, there actually are some billionaires out there or millionaires out there who actually, you know, do good things with their money, even though other people like to tell you not so, you know. So so this one here had the characters of Scarlett Kingston, she's 27, and Arthur Worthing, he's 46. So now this one is an age gap romance. So we also, it's an amnesia trope. So Scarlett wakes up from a fall and thinks she was just in a car accident, when really she was in a car accident 6 months ago with her father, who died in the car accident. Beside her is her father's friend named Arthur. He tells her that she fell off a ladder in his library at his mansion, and he also tells her that she has been living with him in his home. Scarlett goes back to Arthur's home and goes back to the job she was doing for him, but at night she has these dreams that feel so real, and her dreams are of her and Arthur. I have such a hard time with that name. Arthur in a relationship, but when she explains her dreams to Arthur, he doesn't seem like he knows what she is talking about. Like, he's definitely being like obtuse, you know? So I did enjoy this book. This book goes from past to present POV. So you see what's going on in the present time of like her not having any memories. Like, I'd say it's short-term memories that's affecting her, not long-term memories. Like, she remembers being with her dad. Now her father, he was doing fraud, and so he ended up getting caught. So he essentially was going to just kind of like split and, you know, try to live it on like maybe an island that doesn't do, what's the term for it? I don't know if I could say it correctly. Extradition, I think that's what it's called, where there's some islands or some countries where extradite, that type of thing, where they can't prosecute this person because they're in another country, where the country's like, no, once they're here, you're on your own. You can't get this person back, kind of thing. So if this person did anything bad, they can't, the United States can't like take this person from another country and bring them here, you know, that type of thing. and basically hold them at trial and things like that. That's why you'll see like different companies or different banks that are like, everybody talks about like the Cayman Islands and all that stuff, where if you have money, that's where you'd want to store your money, because then it's like the IRS and all this other stuff can't like go after you, you know? So he basically did fraud, and so he was going on the run, and so his daughter decided to go with him because that's her father. And while they're on the run, you know, he was trying to do some stuff like to help his daughter, you know, because he didn't want her to be in the same boat as him, like, you know, running from the law and all that stuff, and FBI and all that stuff. So while they're running from, you know, the law and stuff, they end up getting into a car accident, and he ends up getting killed. And so she ended up having like a concussion, but she was, you know, overall okay. And I think her father did it to where, you know, obviously she wouldn't get in trouble, so she never got in trouble for it or anything like that. So she ended up staying with Arthur. So you see like past POV, the past POV of her, because she's the main protagonist. And so you see like past chapters where she's living there with him, and the more they get to know each other, the more they start to like feel things for each other, like romantically. And he was trying to like, you know, not pursue it, because he's like, she's young, you know, she's very young, she's my, you know, my friend's daughter, you know, even though he's extremely attracted to her. But he didn't want to push her into a relationship because he's like, I'm older, you know, that type of thing. So he very much was like trying to not do it. And she was like, but I'm a grown adult. She's like, I can make these decisions for myself. So you see those past chapters of like them, how they got together and how they kind of had to overcome like these hiccups they had, you know, to make their relationship work. And then when you go into the present POV, she keeps having like these dreams, and they feel so real, of her being in a relationship and, you know, obviously being sexual with Arthur. And she is trying to explain it in a way to obviously not be embarrassing. And he's basically like, no, we're not in a relationship. So he's basically lying to her and telling her like, you know, we're not in a relationship. And he did that in a way because the doctor was like, well, you don't want to push it too soon on her. You want to give her a chance to kind of like recollect her memories on her own, rather than telling her, you know, her memories. And so that's what he was trying to do. He was basically trying to do it in a way to where she could recollect her memories on her own, rather than him telling her. And so she was, you know, once she kind of finds out the truth, she's mad at him for, in a way. And he was like, I'm sorry, you know, he's like, I wanted you to recover your memories on your own and everything. And, you know, once he kind of like was explaining, you know, his feelings, and, you know, you know, they were able to like work with it. And so toward the end, you had a bit of like hiccups that happened in their like previous, you know, in the previous time of like 6 months before this, you know, or how many months before this, where they were having kind of like the same issues. And so they, you know, it was almost kind of like them dealing with the same issue again, you know. But once, you know, she was able to recover her memories, she was able to like, okay, this is what we did to like solve our conundrum that we had before, you know. But I really did enjoy it. So I had said, I'm not a huge fan of that style of storytelling where it's like past and present, like especially if there's a lot of like past POVs. I get annoyed with it a lot, you know, especially when you have a lot of time jumps and stuff. It can get annoying. But I said it can get confusing or annoying depending on how many times the author uses the past POV to tell the story. But Noelle Adams did it in a way where it didn't frustrate me. The more you saw the past, the more you could see that while Scarlett was getting her life together, she was also falling in love with Arthur, and he in return. And in the present POV, we could see that her amnesiac self was doing the same thing as before without her knowing that she fell in love with Arthur before. So she's essentially falling in love with him again. If you ever seen the movie, there's a movie called The Vow, where it's based on a true story where, what's her name again? Rachel McAdams' character ended up getting into this car accident, and she couldn't remember her time with her husband. And so he told her, like, why don't we start over again and you could fall in love with me again? And that's basically what happened, is that Rachel McAdams' character ended up falling in love with, it was Channing Tatum that played the husband. She ended up falling in love with her husband again. I think in that story, in the true story, I don't think the woman ever recovered her memories. I don't think she ever got her memories back. It was almost like, it's almost like your body knows, but your mind needs to catch up. You know, that's essentially what it was in this story too, was her mind, her body knew this person, but her mind was trying to catch up, you know, to the body. So that's essentially what it was. But I did like that fact where you see her kind of like fall for him again, you know, fall in love with him again. I said she didn't know if her dreams were real or her having wish fulfillment. Like, she was like, am I crazy? Like, are these real memories? Or is this something that I want to happen, that I wish would happen? And so she's trying to look at her thoughts of, like, you know, why am I attracted to him? And things like that. So that's basically what she had to go through, you know, was that. But I did really enjoy that one. I can't remember which, I gave it 4 stars, yeah. 4 stars to that one. The next one was, part of the series was called Replacement. And this one here had it to where, I dropped my one thing. They were twins, identical twins. So I gave this one 5 stars. So we have Jade and Amber. Her twin sister is Amber and she's Jade. The last name is Delacourt. They're both 27. And then there's William Worthing, and he's 36. So it's not a huge age gap, just a little bit. So we got twin swap, and there's a fake engagement. So the content warning in here is there's stalking in here. There's talk of pharmaceutical drug use, corruption of a law enforcement officer. So Jade Delacourt has been on her own since she was 18. She left her father's control, and her twin sister chose to ignore her after that. So one day her twin sister Amber decides to contact Jade. Once they meet again, Amber tells her that she cannot give her any money, even though Jade didn't ask her, and she can help Jade out from her stalker by switching their identities. So she assumes Amber's identity, and right from the start, Jade notices that William, it's supposed to be Amber's fiance, isn't who Amber described him to be. And the more time she spends with William, the more she likes him. Like, Amber was like telling her, oh, well, he's very closed off and very cold, and he's cruel in a way to where he always is asking her, you know, what she's spending the money on and different things like that, you know, like, because he'll go and give her a credit card to use and things like that. And so clearly you could see Amber was using him in a way where she was using him for his money. And so when Jade comes along, Jade's like, well, I'm not going to use this guy for his money. I feel bad that she's like, I'm in this situation where I'm getting stalked from this man, so I need a safe place to stay. But she's like, but I don't want to use this guy. I don't want to use him. You know, I just want to pretend that I'm my sister in a way to where I can kind of get through this. So the more time she spends with William, the more she starts to feel things for him. And Amber had told her from the beginning, like, they did not have a relationship. They did not have sex. They slept in the same bed, but they didn't have sex and none of that other stuff. And then so the more time William spends with Jade, who he thinks is Amber, the more he's like, something is off about her. She's not acting the same, you know? So just because this person's a twin doesn't mean they have the same personality. So William needs a fiance that looks good for his image. He is trying to portray for his family and for his business, and all of a sudden Amber starts to change, and he doesn't know why. His fiance, whom he started to not like, all of a sudden changes to someone he starts to like and care about. Now, there was a scene in here, it almost kind of reminded me a little bit of, it almost had a similar vibe to it. If anybody's ever seen the movie, not Pretty in Pink, no, not Pretty in Pink, Pretty Woman. Pretty Woman, there's a scene with Vivian where she goes into the bathroom and she's like, I'll be right out. And he goes in and he's like, you know, what was that? And she's like, oh, nothing. And she's hiding something behind her back. And he's like, what are you hiding? And she's like, nothing. And he's like, look, I don't deal with someone who's doing drugs. So he's like, he's trying to like basically tell her he could leave. And she's like, no, I'm not doing that. And so she shows him that she has floss, like she's going to be flossing. So it kind of reminded me of that in this scene, where you have this scene where William is kind of asking her, like, are you on drugs again? You know, and you clearly find out Amber was abusing pharmaceutical drugs. And so he goes into Amber, you know, Amber's bag, you know, Jade, goes in her bag and he's looking for her, basically like her pill container. And he looks in there and he sees like all it is just basically like Advil, like regular over the counter, like Advil or Tylenol or whatever it is. And so he's like, what did you do with the other pills? And she's like, oh, I got rid of them. She's like, you know, she's telling him like, I don't need those pills. You know, she's basically saying like, I got off those pills. So like I said, she's pretending to be her sister and pretending to be like, I'm clean. I'm not, you know. So it kind of reminded me a little bit of Pretty Woman, where he's accusing her of like drug intake, which I don't blame him, like especially if the Amber was addicted to some kind of like pharmaceutical stuff. He doesn't want to be around somebody who's dealing in drugs. Plus also it's a bad for his image, you know, especially if he's trying to portray himself as like responsible and everything. You can't have a partner that's irresponsible and is getting high and doing all kinds of like reckless things. It doesn't look good for him. So there was that scene that had came up, and so she realized that her sister had obviously some kind of like pharmaceutical issue. And so she ended up dumping those pills, you know, that were there. I think she ended up like either putting them away, or I think she ended up dumping them like in the trash or something. So all she had in the pill container were basically just over-the-counter pain reliever, you know, nothing harmful. After that, he kind of like starts to change a bit. And the more you see him like changing to the point of like him falling for her. There was a point in the book where I'm like, he definitely knows this is not Amber. You know, like he definitely is like, he's obviously not saying anything, but he definitely knows Jade is not Amber. Like this is a different person. There was a scene where he ends up finding out that Amber has a twin. That clicked for him. That clicked for him. And he knew those were not the same, you know. It's not the same people, you know. So as I really enjoyed this book, I could have gotten annoyed with the fact that though most of the book Jade is lying to William about her identity, but honestly in this book it didn't bother me. I could see how much Jade felt bad for continuing the ruse her sister came up with, and I suspected that William would figure it out eventually before she told him, which he did. But I also loved how William kept up the ruse as well, because he wanted Jade to trust him enough for her to tell him the truth. And that's basically what it was. He had told her he wanted her to tell him the truth. Like he didn't want to have to confront her. He wanted her to be honest with him. And I was like, you know what? I respect that. I actually respect that, because like he wanted her to be honest with him rather than him confronting her and saying, you lied, you know, and all that stuff. So that's what he wanted. And so she eventually did tell him, I'm not Amber. I'm Jade. And so he was like, almost like they had this sense of relief, like finally, she's telling me who she is, who she really is. And you realize that he was falling in love with Jade. He was not falling in love with Amber. And that was something that Jade had kind of like had herself, was like she kept trying to like deny him sex for a short time, because she was like, well, I don't want him having sex and thinking it's Amber he's having sex with. I want him to have sex with me and think of me, Jade. And so when they had sex for the first time, she still thinks that, he thinks that she's Amber. So after they have, coitus and everything, and everything's kind of calming down, she thinks that she hears him whisper Jade, and he obviously did, because he obviously knew it was her. So I did like that part too, where he obviously like whispered her name, and she was like, did he say that? Did he say my name? And it's like, no, he couldn't know that it's me. And I'm like, girl, he's not dumb. He's not dumb. So I did like that part. So I said, I also loved how protective he was. Once he found out that she actually had a stalker, he was like, it's on. He goes, I need to protect my woman. And I was like, hell yeah. Especially because it's like, this guy was a creep, like all stalkers, are the, like these creepy people. Like they just come out of the nowhere, and then they just start leaving you like these things. Like she started getting left roses, and then it kind of like escalated to more of that. And him kept like showing up at her places of work and like smiling at her and different things like that. And it escalates, as a stalker. The stalker gets more brave and brazen, more confident in themselves and the things that they can get away with, and the thing with the laws and everything, there's still like not great laws when it comes to like stalking and things like that. You still have to prove this person's stalking you and all that stuff. So it very much is on the victim to prove that this person is doing what they're doing, and so eventually the person hopefully will get caught, and so yeah, I really liked that he kind of like, once he found out the truth of why they switched identities and everything like that, and he found out that she had a stalker, he was very much like in protective mode of like, I'm going to protect my lady. And I was like, I really enjoyed that one. So yeah, I ended up giving that one 5 stars because I really enjoyed it. And like I said, it could have had it to where I could have gotten annoyed, where I was like, I really don't like the fact that she's lying to him. But in the way they're kind of like lying to each other, which obviously isn't good for like beginning relationships. But in this case, I was like, I could accept it, especially because of the fact that she had a stalker, and so she was using as protection. So I kind of felt like she had a justifiable excuse, to me, I felt like it was justified. And, in a way, he was using her sister as a way of like a fake engagement. It wasn't like he truly loved Amber, because if he did, it definitely would have not worked, but the fact that he didn't love Amber, and he was actually annoyed with Amber, he was getting to the point where he was going to probably dump Amber, because of like, he wanted the relationship to not be like in name only or like fake. He wanted it to be a real relationship, and she just kind of like definitely was not into him. And so he was getting to the point where he was like, well, if she's not really into me, then what's the point of like this? I want to pursue this and be it romantically, and she didn't want that. So he was ready to kind of like say, here, we're done, because they had this thing in their contract and all that stuff. And so he was going to end it anyway, So to me, I was like, it was more justified. And I do think that Noelle Adams / Claire Kent, they she has a way of, not they, it's one person, she has a way of good plots. I'll just say that. Good plots, good plot points. Every now and again, I'll come across a book that I'm not really a big fan of, but I'd say for the most part, I do like Noelle Adams / Claire Kent most of their books. Every now and again I come across a dud, but I'd say this series I really enjoyed. So the next book in the series was called Redemption. This one definitely had more triggering things in it because the heroine is a former drug addict. So she very much is trying to change her perception of like how she looks to people. Because for years she partied for like how many years and developed obviously a certain reputation for like her family, her friends, different things like that. So she wanted to start fresh and be a better person. So we got Louisa Worthing. Her father is a billionaire, and Caleb. So this is a bodyguard romance. So we got the content warning is former party girl who had a drug addiction, and also there's a stalker in here. Same stalker. It's the same person. So Louisa Worthing is the daughter of a billionaire, and 3 years ago, she was an absolute mess. She partied too hard to the point of her being addicted to drugs and alcohol, and Caleb was her bodyguard, getting her out of one scrape after another, all the while treating him badly and sexually harassing him. She tried to sleep with him when she was high or drunk, like she would like try to flirt with him, different things like that. Definitely, like I felt like it was sexual harassment on her part, you know? Now that she is clean and sober, that time in her life she wants to forget and is embarrassed by because she isn't proud of her behavior. She hasn't seen Caleb since he checked her into rehab 3 years ago, and now Louisa needs to be protected again because the man who stalked her cousin, William's fiancée, Jade, now set his sights on Louisa. So William and Jade ask Louisa if Caleb can protect her again, and Louisa reluctantly agrees because even though she is attracted to Caleb, he reminds her of the past. The more time they spend together in her cottage, the more Caleb can't hold back his feelings and they start a relationship. Now this one here definitely had it to where she has past memories where she's remembering times. There were times that she doesn't have memories from, like there was talk in here of definitely, I'd say, I might put that in, like I forgot to put that in, but I'd say maybe that's another trigger warning that I probably should put in. There was a thing where she has vague memories of where she was partying a little too hard and she ended up waking up in a bathroom. And from the way the author Noelle Adams wrote the scene, you could pretty much surmise that she was probably sexually assaulted by multiple men. But she was passed out and she doesn't remember. She doesn't have any recollection of it. So, in a way, it's like, yes, it's still a violation that happened to her. But I would say it's almost like her body's response to trauma was forgetting it, you know? Because of like all the substances she had in her body too. So I almost think it might be a better thing to not have that memory, you know? So for her, she doesn't remember what happened, but she could pretty much surmise that that's probably what happened to her. And so he ended up finding her in the bathroom, and he went to go pick her up to obviously, you know, take her to the hospital. And she like screamed at him, and he had to leave the room, and other people came in and everything like that. And I think that was a way of her, like, I almost want to say, I think that was a way of her saying like, don't touch me, I'm like dirty, you know? Like people who end up getting like violated in that way, they blame themselves, and also they don't think of themselves as clean. They feel like they're dirty and they got violated and they don't want anybody touching them, you know, things like that. And also, would you want anybody else touching you when you know, had someone else take you against your will, yeah, I would assume somebody would be like, don't touch me. You know, understandable. So I think for her, like, it also was an embarrassing thing for her, is that she doesn't remember what happened to her, but she can suspect that that's what happened to her. So obviously she had this sense of guilt, like, I got messed up too much, that I let people take advantage of me, I let people violate me, and I don't remember it. To me, I think of it almost as it's almost like a good thing you don't remember it, but for her, she has this sense of like guilt and embarrassment and hating herself for putting herself into that situation. Yes, men should not sexually assault women, of course. But as a woman, you have to take responsibility for your body. And when you're out in situations, you have to know you could protect yourself, you know? This is why I would tell women, like, if you're going to go out to clubs or partying, don't go out by yourself. Go with other women, you know, or even some gay men. Like, the gay men you hang out with, they're going to protect you, you know? Don't go out by yourself, and don't overindulge to the point where you black out, you know, or you cannot protect yourself anymore, you know? Like I've gotten, you know, drunk a few times in the past. And I never liked the feeling, because I always felt like if somebody touches me, would I be able to fight this person off, you know? And obviously, you know, it depends on the person too. Even if you are sober, a man could still take advantage of you and hold you down and all that stuff. But to me, I felt like I was more confident. I'm more confident when I'm not indulging in, you know, substances that make you weak, you know? So she had a lot of that, thinking of all the stuff of past mistakes that she made, and also past mistakes with Caleb too. Like, she had a lot of guilt of treating him badly. And like I love the first thing that she did, like after seeing him after a few years, is she apologized to him. She apologized to him and told him, I'm sorry for my behavior. I want to be a better person, and I don't want to do that ever again. And so he accepted her apology. She kept trying to apologize to him, and he kept telling her, like, you don't have to apologize to me again and again and again. You said sorry to me, and I accept your apology. You don't have to keep feeling this guilt of like these things that you did to this person in the past. If you apologize to them, you apologize. You don't have to keep whipping yourself to atone for that behavior you did in the past when you were under the influence, you know? So I think a lot of addicts, they carry around a lot of guilt. And I'd say if they have, you know, if they're a good person, yeah, they're going to feel that guilt. I don't think all addicts are good people, you know, deep down. There are some people who are just shitty people, and they do drugs and they're just a shit person, you know? But there are people out there who in the world who do get themselves clean, that were a good person, you know, all their life, and they did some bad things when they were under the influence, and they don't want to make those mistakes again, you know? So for her, she very much was, she got indulged too much, probably from her father, because, you know, he's a billionaire, and usually, you know, when you come from a family of money, you come from privilege, you know, for sure. This is why I don't believe in like skin tone privilege. I believe in wealth privilege. I think that if you were born into wealth and always had wealth, you very much are privileged, you know, because you have a lot of things, a lot of access to you that other people don't have. Like, if somebody's poor, they don't have access to good dental, good health care, good food, healthy food. Where when you're wealthy, you have access to all of that stuff. You know, there are wealthy people who run the world. And if you don't think that, you know, you may be too much with your head in the sand. But I believe in, you know, there is wealth privilege. And so when it comes to that, I think there's people who come from wealth and they get very guilty about their wealth. I think, you know, you don't want to give away all your money, obviously, because you're not stupid. You don't be dumb. But you can use your wealth for good to help out other people, you know? I think you could do that. I think more people, you come into a lot of money or you're born into money and maybe you get like an inheritance. Maybe you take some of your inheritance and you start a charity or you feed the homeless or whatever, you know, like you do something with it, something good that helps out people who are less fortunate than you. I think you did good enough. I think it's good enough to do that. You don't have to whip yourself. You don't have to beat yourself because you were born into privilege, born into money. That's not your fault. You were born that way. You can't, it's with anything. You know, whether you're born a certain race, you're born that way. You can't help it. You know, born with a birth defect, you can't help that. You know, born with money, you can't help that. It's your parents or your grandparents or your great-grandparents that had afforded you that privilege, you know? So instead of feeling guilty about it, you know, which she was, you know, having this guilt, you know, which I think that's what it was, do good things with it, you know? So with her, like, she didn't need to work, obviously, because her father was still paying for her, you know? Or she had maybe some kind of, like, inheritance that she was living off of. But she didn't need to work. So she was basically taking, doing, like, art classes for people and things like that, which I thought was really cool, that she was doing art classes and helping other people. So I'm like, you're doing things in a way of helping others, whether it's, you know, what's the term, like, I can't say it. I can't say it. I cannot say the word. I know right now it's not going to come out of my mouth. I may put it like down here if I remember to do it like when I'm editing this video. I can't say the word, but you could do a way of that, or doing other things. Like if you're a creative person, you could always do like free art classes for people. And you're like, maybe you went to school for like art and you learned all these different skills. And maybe you're like, hey, I want to open up a art school for low income families. You know, people who are low income. I want to open up art school and give free lessons to kids who are very like creative and they want to like learn. I think that's a great thing to do, especially if you have money coming in, you don't have to worry about finances. You do something like that. I think that's great. You know, especially like when it comes to the arts and things like that. A lot of those programs end up getting like taken out of schools. Like right now, my daughter's middle school has to where people come in and they volunteer their time and do adventures in art, things like that. So I think that's a good thing, that you're taking your skills that you learned and you're helping other kids, you know, and things like that. So learn like art history, things like that. You know, I think it's really interesting. Where I always had art class when I was in school, but they took all that stuff away. They took art programs away. They took music programs away for a lot of schools. And you need that creative outlet besides just learning about math and algebra and, you know, history and all that stuff, you know? There needs to be some kind of creative outlets too for kids. So I think if you were born with money, always will have money, like say you have billions of dollars, you could use it for good. You know, you can use it in a way to where you're helping others, you know, but like I said, don't whip yourself in the back to the point where you're harming yourself, because that's not good. So for me, I'm like, there was a lot of like, with both of these characters, a lot of internal hiccups because her guilt, her constant guilt. And then with him being the bodyguard, you know, he had this like, oh, well, I shouldn't get involved with her because I'm there to protect her, even though, even when she was you know, like on drugs and stuff, he was still attracted to her, though he was angry at her for her being on drugs, and he wanted her to get off of them. And he didn't want, you know, obviously want her to OD and all that stuff. So even though she treated him like crappy, he could have left that position. He had feelings for her, and he didn't want her to, you know, keep going down that bad road. He's the one that took her to rehab. Like, her father kept putting her in like one of those Richie rehabs where it's like, it doesn't really help you. All they're there for is just to take your money, and then they'll like, oh, well, you could just get off of this for a little while, and then people get onto it again. And it's like, no, you can't put addicts in like a Club Med, you know, type of, you know, you can't do that for like jail. You can't do that for like rehab. These people need hard rehab where they stay there. They're forced to stay there until they're clean, until they can get on their own and do things on their own and not, you know, relapse and go to their meetings and all that stuff. So with her, like, she very much had to be structured in her activities and the things that she did to keep her mind like occupied, instead of like thinking, you know, obviously thinking about the past, and then also thinking about getting high again, you know. And she did, you know, she used to like go with her friends and have like a drink or two, like these new friends that she ended up developing with this area that she was living in. But she'd only stick to like one drink. Now, she ended up like, in the book, she ended up like drinking two, and he was kind of like, why did you have two? You know, he was kind of like, I don't want you going back down, you know, backstepping and going back down this road again, you know, especially when he cared about her a lot. So it was a lot of like internal things that they both had to deal with to come together, but still enjoyed it. It still was an enjoyable book, but it had definitely a lot of her feeling guilty about, like, you know, obviously the access to wealth she had, and also guilty of her past behavior of like being on drugs and things like that. So the next book I ended up reading, this was the last book in the series, I believe. Yeah, this is the last book in the series, called Restoration. I love this one. This one here I really enjoyed. I gave this one 5 stars. So we have Autumn and Edmund. He goes by Worth most of the time, but she calls him Edmund. His last name is Worthing. So he's like another cousin of like the other ones. So we got the trope of stuck on an island. There's, of course, forced proximity. And there's an assistant and boss. So she's his assistant. So Autumn has been working for Edmund for 4 years now. She is basically his personal assistant, and she lives in his mansion he inherited from his parents. His parents died when he was 15, so he hasn't had any kind of family structure for a long time. He has cousins, but it's not the same. He was a bit of a party boy when he was younger and doing all kinds of things and traveling for years. But lately he's been growing and maturing, but things change when he starts dating this gold digger woman. Autumn can't stand the woman, and one night he comes home high, and Autumn takes care of him. And that night changes things between them, and Edmund dumps his girlfriend and decides he wants to go on a yacht vacation. Now, he ended up taking that pill because, you know, she was telling him, his girlfriend there was like, oh, here, try this and you'll relax. And it was obviously something where it was messing with him. And to me, I'm like, no. Do not give people drugs. Do not do that. You don't know how this person's going to handle this pill. Now, you're responsible for that. You know, you're responsible for how this person is. This person could have had a heart attack. This person could have died. You don't know what this person's system is going to do, what this person's body is going to do when it comes to, like, you know, if you want to go and hurt yourself with drugs, be my guest. That's your own free will, but don't do it to others. So she had given him this pill, and he ended up taking it, and it obviously messed him up to where he was looking at Autumn in a different way. Like, obviously their relationship was more of like friends, you know, like they were friends for years. He wasn't like a terrible person with her. He wasn't a terrible boss. He just was, like absent-minded. Like he had no structure, you know, like to keep himself, have any kind of purpose basically. So he really had no purpose, like he had money, like, he obviously knew of ways of like keeping the money going and everything, with investments and all that stuff. But he wanted to be more serious. And so with Autumn, she kind of took him and kind of kept him on the straight and narrow of like, hey, why not do this? Why not do that? Like almost kind of like what a wife would do, with a husband who's kind of like more absent-minded and needs more structure. You could have a woman who's in the husband's life that is like, hey, we need to go do this, we need to go do that. And the husband's like, okay, and goes and does this. That's basically what it is. There's some men out there who need a woman to give them like this direction, Otherwise they kind of like, they flounder, And so, like, my husband, I have to constantly tell him, for one, you do not do the dishes well. He sucks at dishwashing. And I'm like, dude, how many times I go and after you did a dish, I have to rewash it because you don't do it right, And then the other thing is he constantly, like, I use sponges to clean and I don't use a dishwasher. I don't have a dishwasher. I clean the dishes like a regular person, not, with a dishwasher and everything. I don't. I've only had one dishwasher in an apartment, and it was a shitty apartment, and I did not want to touch that dishwasher. I was like, ew, I don't know, I'm not touching that. It's probably dirty inside. So I did not want to touch that dishwasher. I'll just say I've lived in some shitty apartments with roaches and stuff. So with my husband, he does not do the dishes very well. And so I have to constantly be on him like, dude. Or I get done and I'm putting dishes away and I see how it's kind of dirty and I'm like, and I just throw it back in the sink, like I'm going to redo it. And how many times I have to ask him, or how many times I have to tell him, stop leaving the sponge wet because it gets funky, it smells bad, and I have to throw it away. I try to keep the sponge as long as possible. As soon as it starts getting funky, you throw it away and you use a new one. And then I don't use a full sponge when I'm doing my dishes. Now I'm going on to like my home life. I don't use a full sponge. Full sponge maybe like this size. I don't use a full sponge. I cut it in half. It saves the sponges so they last longer. So he will do stupid stuff. And I have to like, don't do this. I don't like it when you do this. And I have to like direct him in the way of how I want it done. Like when you're washing the dishes, you have to make sure there's no extra residue left behind. You have to do it this way. My stepson kept throwing silverware in my pants. And I kept telling him, dude, do not throw silverware in my pants, because if it scratches up my pants, now I have to buy new ones, because the coating, the Teflon on them or whatever the coating is, it will come off if it gets scratched. So you have to be very careful with some of your pants. So it's like, with him, I have to like, dude, if you're going to put silverware in the sink, don't put it in my pans or my pots. You could put it on a plate. That's fine. No pants. No pots. No. So like, it's the same thing with them, where I have to like teach them, no. Don't do this. Do this instead. It's the same thing with my daughters. Like, no, we're not doing this. We do this. I have certain ways that I do things in my home when it comes to washing my dishes, when it comes to putting my stuff away, putting the dishes away. I have certain areas that I put them in, that type of thing. So when it comes to them, it's almost like they don't listen, You see, like, men don't listen. This is why men don't listen. My husband, I have to constantly tell him, stop leaving water in the sponge. So that's basically what it was with his character, where he needed like that direction, he needed like that kick in the ass to like do things correctly, do things right. And so that's kind of like how their relationship is, where it's almost, she's almost like, in a way, almost like a wife to him, or kind of like a mother, you know, that type of thing. And so he starts to mature, but then this bitch comes along that's, you know, obviously a gold digger and only wants the man for his money. And then that happens with where he gets high, and that kind of snaps him kind of like into gear of like, wow, I didn't realize how beautiful Autumn is. You know, she's beautiful, and she makes my life better, you know, and I appreciate her. And so this comes to the time where Autumn is like, I need to do something with my life besides being like his babysitter, you know, besides being Edmund's babysitter. I need to have something else for myself, you know. So she wants to go back to school and get her MBA and do something with that. And so when she goes and she does a resignation letter to Edmund, he sees the paper and he's like, what? You know, he's like freaking out because he's like, you're going to leave me? You know, like, you like, I need you for, you know, to take care of me and all that stuff. And so they end up going on this boat where he's like, I'll allow you to leave, but I want you to go on one last trip with me, you know, where he's doing like this, how many week, you know, sabbatical, which obviously is nice because he's a billionaire. So, you know, it must be nice, you know? So he's on this boat, but first he was going to do a yacht, and he decided, I don't want all these people around. He just wanted basically him and her, you know? And so they go on this smaller boat. And so it they end up getting into a storm, and he tried to like bypass the storm. But they ended up washing ashore, ended up falling off the boat and washing ashore onto this abandoned island. Now, the island was something that a friend of his actually told him about, like to kind of go there as like a vacation kind of thing. But obviously you would have the yacht still there, so it's not like you're abandoned, you know, on this island, but they actually got abandoned. So now they have to work together as a team instead of like her doing it all and him kind of like, you know, doing whatever. They had to work together as a team to help each other survive, you know. So I really enjoyed it. So while they're on the island, they start getting like more romantically close, to the point of like, you know, they get together. So I really enjoyed this book. But I will say I do love forced proximity. That's one of my favorites, is forced proximity, or survival romances. I love survival romances. I said, especially island ones. So they're stuck on an island somewhere. I really like those ones. I said, so this was an easy read for me. Both of them definitely held much of their feelings back. So there was some yearning in here, and characters that didn't know how to express their feelings. I also enjoyed that these two were friends with each other, and she helped to guide him into more of a meaningful life. Which that's how I felt like. I felt like she was kind of like taking him on the right path for himself, to like get him out there to find meaning of like, what can you do with your money in a way to have more, you know, meaning in your life. Otherwise, if you're just some playboy that just fucks around with your money, I mean, obviously it's fun, but it's like, you need purpose in life. You need something to keep you going, you know? Like for me, I like to feel needed, you know? If people need me, I have a purpose. Otherwise, if I'm not needed, what's my purpose in life? You know, if I'm not needed, I don't have a purpose. And then why am I here? You know? So, because I don't believe in the religious aspect, well, you're here for a reason. I don't believe in that. What is my purpose in life? So, my purpose, as I try to do it, is I try to help people. You know, I try to help people in some way. I try to be helpful. You know, I try to find something for myself to keep going, you know, especially because there's a lot of people in the world who They use other people. They're cruel. I don't want to be cruel. I don't want to use people. I don't want to go and treat people badly. I want to treat people good. I want, like I'm taking care of elderly people. I'm taking care of children. I want to be a good person and do good things to others. Even though I know for me, I don't believe that there is an afterlife, but still, I want to treat my life as I only have one life. I want to be the best person I can be. Even if I say to myself, there's no afterlife, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm wrong and there actually is an afterlife? I could be wrong. This is why I say I'm an agnostic. I don't say I'm atheist. Atheists pretty much have that like rhetoric where they're like, none of that stuff exists, and then they kind of like, I don't know, have this like asshole attitude of like Christians are shitty people and blah blah blah, or whoever it is, like whatever you believe in, you're like, oh, that's stupid to believe in that. And I'm like, I have issues with religion, any religion. I have issues with it, but I understand why people have a belief. And I do think some people do need religion in their life. They need some kind of structure, Some people, they flounder, they're drowning. They need something to hold on to. So religion for them is almost like a life jacket, That's the way I think about it. So for me, I like to be of service. I like to help people. Like if I had better feet, I would have been a nurse or tried to be a doctor, because I like to help people. It's what I would say is my calling. I do like to do that. So with her, she very much was an organizer, and so she kind of kept him on the straight and narrow. And so the more time she spent around him, the more he became a better person, like she made him into a better person. And sometimes that can happen with somebody, is you may flounder, but somebody puts you like on the right path and they're telling you, hey, go down this path. You're going to be better off going down this way. And there are people out there who will help guide you into that, guide you to find a more purposeful life, a more meaningful life, So with that, she very much gave that to him. And so he started to learn more on the island, and he's like, I like to help you. I like to help you too. And I was like, yeah, there you go. Like, I was like, good for him, like I liked the fact that he matured and he grew on the island and taking care of her. He wanted to take care of her. He wanted to protect her. And I was like, yes, I was like, yes, there we go. So I really liked that one. I thought it was really good. So the last one I ended up reading, this one's more of a kid's book, but I'm like, this one I think is great. Picking up any of these books is almost kind of gives you like the Cliff Notes version of like a historical event. And so instead of reading like a full huge history book on like the civil rights movement or who was Martin Luther King Jr., you can read this book and it kind of gives you a summary of this person, So I ended up reading Who Was Jackie Robinson. Now, in the month of February, they have Black History Month, and so Barnes & Noble will have, like Black History Month books and stuff like that. So when I was in the kids section, I was like, oh, hey, let me pick up some of these books that are like, who was, or what was this, and type of thing. Because I think it's good to have that, to remember obviously history, or remember certain figures that in a way were icons of changing how things ran. And so I ended up reading this one here, was Who Was Jackie Robinson, because he didn't want to be known as the first black baseball player, because he didn't want his race to be the highlight of it, which respect to him for that. But he wanted to, change how things were, because back in the day, for professional sports, they did not want black people playing with white people. They wanted to keep it segregated, You know, same thing with like any restaurants you go to, hotels, all kinds of stuff. It was definitely a lot more difficult for individuals who had darker skin. So it was good. It was, I will say, like, it made me very emotional reading it, because I don't like to see segregation and I don't like to see discrimination from anybody. You know, I grew up with like, love everybody, no matter what their race is, no matter what their religion is, love everybody, you know, as long as somebody treats me with respect, I'm going to treat them with respect. So I said, I bought this for my youngest daughter to read. Jackie Robinson is one of my husband's favorite baseball players, which he is. Like, he puts Jackie Robinson kind of like in his top 5 of baseball players. I said, I enjoyed this book. I said, it's a good book to have young readers read, especially if you don't want to read a big, like, autobiography. That's what it is, autobiography. If you don't want to read an autobiography, I think this is a good Cliff Notes version of it, you know, where it kind of gives you a history of like how he grew up and, you know, what he did and all that stuff. Like, I didn't know he was in the military. He had got drafted into the military, which at that time, most of all military age men were drafted around that time. Now I'd say we don't really have a draft anymore, even though it could still happen, because men still have to sign up for selective service when they're 18. Which I think should be, that you should just eliminate that, you know? So I said, I had no idea that Jackie Robinson was a multi-talented sports player. Now, he got into golf. I had no idea he knew how to do golf. He did basketball, he did football, but he's most famous for baseball. And I was like, I had no idea about that. Like, it was interesting to learn more about the man, and how he basically got some advice from some of the white owners. Like, there was a owner of I can't remember the guy's name. He's like famous for it too. And he basically told Jackie, like, don't let these people get to you. Stay calm and don't show them that the things they say to you, the racist things they say to you, don't let it bother you. Because then it's going to make the public look like, oh, this person who's black can't control themselves. So I thought that was really good advice that he gave to Jackie Robinson of like, keep your cool, even if they say nasty things to you. Because what it shows is they can't control their mouths, but you can control your behavior, you know? So I thought it was really good. And so he was very talented in multiple sports, but he also was a religious man. You know, he was a Christian, and he was with his wife for a long time before they had gotten married, you know. He got married in like his late 20s because he was trying, like, obviously trying his best to make money and do well for him, you know, and everything like that before he got married. And so they ended up having like, I think 3 or 4 kids. I think it was like 4 children, I think. It was sad though, because you hear about his eldest son who had, I think went to the military, and he came out of the military with like, he probably had PTSD, but he was addicted to drugs, and he got clean. And then the poor guy died in a car accident. Like, that's sad. You know, like, he lost his brother, you know, like he had an older brother that ended up getting killed. And then he lost his eldest son. I'm like, it was sad. And I'm like reading it and I'm like tearing up. I was tearing up and everything. I was just like sitting there crying. And I was like, this is supposed to be like more of a kid's book. And I'm just like, man, I'm like crying here reading this book. So I thought it was good. I did enjoy it. And I gave it to my youngest. I told her, do you want to keep this book? I said, you know, it's about... He said, you know, my husband, I said, it's his favorite baseball player. I said, you can read it. I said, if she doesn't want it, I said, I could just give it to my husband. Like, here, you want to keep it, you know, as like a thing. Like, because I know he likes Jackie Robinson. He's got like a Jackie Robinson t-shirt. I bought that for him one year for like, I think Father's Day or his birthday. I gave him a Jackie Robinson t-shirt. So he's got that. And then he's got like some other type of like memorabilia stuff. But yeah, I thought it was a good kids book. Tells you about, like, it gives you like certain summaries of like his time frame, but also talks about time frames of like the civil rights movement. He went and met like Martin Luther King Jr. and walked in the civil rights, like, walks and everything like that. I thought that was good. He, I think was a part of, I believe I remember the NAACP, different things like that. And unfortunately, he died at like in his early 50s. I think it was due to, he had like diabetes, and I think like a heart condition or like a high blood pressure and stuff like that. So that can kind of like, could end up dying from that, complications and things like that. So it's a sad thing that he didn't live like a very long life, but it was very, like very recognizable of like making a difference in like the sport of baseball, but also all sports, including all, black people into the sports. And now you see like, let's say black people are like the majority when it comes to like certain sports, like football. I'd say is a majority black people are in there. Same thing with like basketball, those are dominated sports that black people usually go with. The ones that are kind of less dominated, I'd say, would be golf, because it's more of a rich man's sport, even though you've got you got Tiger Woods, who was, obviously mixed race. And then you've got the, what was the other ones? There was more people that have joined in, that, so that there's like, I definitely more of a rich man sport. Same thing with hockey. Hockey's definitely more for like people who have money, because hockey gear is like fucking expensive. Having like training and all that stuff, doing all that, it's expensive. So I'd say there's still like, you still see black people in that sport, but less so, like having a soccer ball, buying a basketball, football, those are all cheaper things, and a lot of times they're more of what's it called, like subsidized. There's certain sports that are more subsidized and all that stuff, and so they're definitely more cheaper for you to get into. Like you'll see maybe a lot of more Hispanics that are into soccer and all that stuff, like other countries they'll call it football and all that, so anyways, there are different sports that I would say definitely have more black people who dominate that sport, So to me, I was like, he opened doors for others to walk through. So very interesting book. It was a very interesting book. I also ended up picking up, there's a couple other ones I picked up. I picked up the one with the civil rights movement. I did learn that in history class, but I thought, let me brush myself up on civil rights, movement, because maybe I might not remember certain names or the time frame and all that stuff. So I was like, oh, this will be a good one to read. And then also I picked up what was the Underground Railroad. And so I figured those books would be good for, my daughters to read and kind of like brush up on some history and things like that. And it's more easier to digest, books. I think those are good books. And then also at the end, it shows you where they got all their information from. So I think that's good to have like, was it the bibliography on the back? And also there was certain time frames and all that stuff that were there too. I thought was really interesting. Times in history and stuff like that, like, there was a certain point in the book where they talked about Pearl Harbor, which he was on a boat, luckily did not get hit, but he was on a boat back from Hawaii when Pearl Harbor happened. So you're like, when you think about that, because my one uncle, that was my grandmother's older sister, her husband, he was at Pearl Harbor. And that was basically a war he didn't want to talk about. He did not want to have to reminisce about that stuff. So you can imagine, how many lives were lost during that time. So anyways, I had some DNFs. So I'll talk about those ones next. So I tried to get into this one here, Ready or Not by Cara Bastone. I ended up getting about a chapter in. I was listening to this on audio, and I did not like the heroine. I was like, I don't feel like, trying to like suffer through the rest of this book. So I said I got a chapter in and realized that this author isn't for me. Also, I didn't like the main female character. She was trying too hard to be funny when in reality she's an awkward weirdo. I just think, like, if you're naturally funny, it comes naturally to make other people laugh. To me, I felt like she was trying too hard to be funny, you know? And I really just was like not feeling her character. So I'm like, do I really want to go and like sit through her being this awkward weirdo? Or do I just DNF it? So I ended up doing that. I just DNF'd it and was like, nah, this author is not for me. I don't really care for her writing. And it was just like different things that I was just like, nah, not feeling it. And I'm like, if you're not feeling it, don't force yourself, you know? So the next one was called The Edge of Life by Lena Gibson. I could not get into this book. I've been trying to read other post-apocalyptic books by other authors besides Claire Kent. I love Claire Kent's like Kindle series and all the other stuff that she's been doing lately. But I have not found another author yet that I like the book enough to get through it. This one here was the same way. Unfortunately, it wasn't working for me. It was basically like I said, post-apocalyptic, her dealing with all this different stuff that's going on, and then she's supposed to find love, you know, within the book. And like I said, I wasn't feeling it. I maybe got a few pages in, and I was just like, nah, this is not for me. Then the next one I tried dealing with, or tried getting through, was the Love in the Time of Zombies. Now, this is, I think, taking place in like Las Vegas. So I said the writing was okay. I thought the writing was fine, but I wasn't feeling the heroine. There's another heroine where I didn't like her. She was a whiny and complained too much. And I'm just like, ugh, if she whines now, when it's like the apocalypse hasn't even hit yet, what is she going to be like when the apocalypse does happen? Is she going to be even more whiny? I can't handle whiny females. I just can't. They're so annoying. So, yeah, I could not get into that one. It was like maybe like a few pages in, and then her boss was kind of like this, you know, she really didn't like her boss. He was kind of like more of like go with the flow kind of thing, not really responsible type of stuff. And I'm like, is she the one that's going to have to like, you know, be the responsible person here while he's kind of dragging his feet? I'm like, I wasn't sure. So I was like, you know what? I'm not feeling this. So I ended up DNFing that one. And then other ones I DNF'd before I forget was I tried getting through this one here, Heart in the Highlands by Heidi Kimball. This one here is more of, it is a romance, but it's obviously more of a clean romance. So there's no intimacy on page. So I basically put this in my not in the mood, and I'm not sure if I want to go back to this or not because it has one of my least favorite tropes in it, which is Secret Child. And I did not know about this when I delved into it. I did not know it was Secret Child. I really wished it had a trigger warning because I probably would have avoided this book. So I said I might go back to this book at another time, but right now I'm not liking the heroine. To me, I felt like she didn't tell the hero that he was a father for selfish reasons because she was mad that he left her. But that is no reason to not write to him and tell him that he knocked you up. I said, I really loathe the Secret Child trope, and you need to have a really good reason on why you couldn't contact the father. Your feelings don't matter. The only thing that matters is that child growing up and getting to know their father. Now, I would do a trope recommendation where there's only a few books that I have read, and this is why I haven't done a trope recommendation on this one yet of Secret Child, Because I've only found a few books in my life where I've read them where I was like, you know what? This is a good enough excuse of why she did not tell him he had a child. So this book here has it to where both of them are kind of being forced into this marriage. So the hero, he's being forced by his father to be into this marriage. So he gives his father this ultimatum, and he tells his father that I'll marry her, but you have to help my uncle. Now, his uncle is his mother's father, or mother's brother, not father, mother's brother. His mother came from humble beginnings. You know, the family obviously was poor, and his father married her because he just wanted an heir. He just wanted a kid. So she had a boy, she had him, and he's the heir. But the father kind of looks down on the uncle because he's, you know, he's a farmer and all that stuff. He farms sheep. And so the hero, I can't remember his name, I didn't write it down. The hero, he very much wants to help his uncle. So he tells his father that he'll marry her if he will replace his uncle's sheep, because a lot of the sheep ended up getting killed in like this flood. And so the father's like, okay, you know, he'll agree to it. And she's getting married to him, to the hero, because her grandfather is dying. Obviously dying of like consumption, which obviously was tuberculosis back in the day. And so she needs somebody who can obviously take care of her. So what happens is they meet, not at the wedding, but they meet like before that. And they end up realizing, oh, well, maybe it won't be so bad being married to this person, because he's obviously attracted to her and she thinks he's a nice man. So they end up getting married, and of course they consummate their marriage that night. And the next day, he ends up finding out his father's not going to help his uncle. So he's like, you lied to me. I'm angry. You lied to me. So he's like, I'm done. I'm not going to help you get an heir. I'm done. So he takes off. He leaves a letter for her, and he leaves. What he doesn't realize is that that night he got her pregnant. So 4 years later, like 4.5 years later, comes by. He decides to head back home. He was in, I think, Barbados or something like that. And he decides to head back home because his father had a stroke. And so he needs to, like, someone else who can handle the estate. So he goes back home and he sees her again. You know, he ends up finding her. But in the meantime, while he was gone for 4 years, he would write her letters, but he would go and give it to his solicitor so his solicitor could deliver it to her. So that way she didn't know where he was. But she could have easily contacted him by the man's solicitor. So I did not like the fact that once he got there, he was like, he found out that he had a daughter named Charlotte. It annoyed me because I'm like, I don't care how angry you are at this man. Was it right for him to abandon you? No, it was wrong for him to abandon her. You know, absolutely he was in the wrong for that. But I hated the fact that she did not tell him that he was a father, because he probably would have came back sooner if he knew that she was pregnant with his child. Now there is a, let me see if I can find it. There's a Goodreads review on here where I was like, I was just not happy when I read it. Let me see if I can find. They've moved shelves around on the thing now. So when I go into Heart in the Highlands, the reviews, there was this one person. Let me see if I can find it. I can't find the review, but essentially the person was saying that who cares if he didn't know that he was a father? It's like, oh, well, he didn't have that right to know. And I'm like, excuse me? No. It's not like he left her high and dry and she had to go and take care of that kid financially. Every month she got money from him. So it's essentially she got child support. She was essentially getting child support and, you know, what they would call, you know, if you end up getting divorced, and you could get spousal support. She was basically getting spousal support and child support. And then he didn't know, you know, 4.5 years that she had a kid. She could have easily wrote to him and said to him, hey, I had a daughter and the daughter's yours. He would have came back quicker. You know? And the fact that she wasn't going to say anything to him, you know? He could have been gone longer. And she didn't say anything. That pissed me off. That pissed me off, and I was like, I don't care. The fact that he abandoned her. Yes, that was wrong for him to do. But his abandonment does not supersede the fact that she did not tell him that he had a daughter. That really just annoyed me. And I was like, I'm not going to continue with this book. So I ended up DNFing it, and I was like, nope, I don't like it. So the last book I'll discuss, this is another one where it was more of like, I'm not sure if I'm going to continue on with this book. I wasn't feeling it. Now, I do like J.T. Geisinger. I do like this author, but I'm not sure if I'm going to be interested in romantasy from her. I'd rather just read her other books, you know? So, this one here was kind of weird for me. I couldn't get into it. It kind of reminded me a bit of like the Addams Family, where she grew up with this family that's, I don't know, weird, has a lot of secrets and things like that. And she ends up moving away and being away for how many years, and she ends up having a daughter, and then she comes back and she sees her family again and stuff like that. And that's about as far as I got. And I'm like, this is too weird. I'm not really into this. And I couldn't delve into it. It's like secrets in the house and different things like that. And I'm just like, I don't like it when authors, like, they're basically doing it because they're on the hype train of like, oh, well, the publisher or whatever it is saying like, oh, write a romantasy. And it's like, just because the author can write a romantasy, it doesn't mean it's going to be any good, you know? And so for me, I was trying to get into this, but I'm like, you know, I'm just not really into romantasy. I've tried reading the books before, but they're just too weird for me. And I'll just say, like, I'm not really a fantasy girly. You know, I'm not really into fantasy. It's not my type of, you know, books that I get into. Same thing with like science fiction. I'm not into science fiction either. It's just not a genre that I'm into. So I've tried reading some other romantasies and I just can't get through them. And I do have a few romantasies I still need to read. And I'm going to see if I could actually get through like a chapter or two of them and kind of move forward. And if I can't, then it's just not really a genre for me then. So with her, it's like I'll read some other books that she comes out with that are regular contemporaries. But when it comes to like romantasy and all that, you know, like Ruby Dixon was I was a huge fan of, but she started getting into like some other types of books and I just was like not into them. I only really dug her Ice Planet Barbarians or the Ice Home series. I really dug those ones because they were like survival romances and stuff. So I really dug those ones. But some of her other ones are just like, I don't know, too weird. And I just can't get into them. So it's the same thing with this one here where I was like, it's just too weird. I can't get into it. You know, like I can't sink my teeth into it, you know? And it's just like, no, I'm not feeling it. I'm just going to get rid of it. And so I ended up like DNFing that one. And I think I had that through Kindle Unlimited, and I ended up like returning it back to like Kindle. But that's pretty much what I read so far. I am reading something right now, but of course I'm not going to get done with it until like March or maybe the end of February. So I ended up picking up, this is more of a newer book, came out recently. This is Of Ink and Alchemy, I think it's Alchemy, by Sloane St. James. I love the cover. So they're both tattooists. We've got Logan and Kelly, and he is running like this tattoo shop that her father owned, and she wants to own the tattoo shop one day. And he's about 5 or 6 years older than her, and so he realizes, he's like, it's time for me to like get her, you know, like to be in a relationship with her, because she's pretty much like, I want to like, you know, I want to settle down. She's, I want to, you know, get married one day. And so she's pretty much letting him know, like, I want to get serious with somebody. I don't want to just like mess around and stuff. And she's dating this guy right now named Jason, and Logan thinks this guy's a douchebag. He's like, this guy's a fucking douchebag. And so he does not want her to settle down with Jason. He's like, hell no, she's going to be with me. So Logan's pretty much like, nope, I have to like, you know, pursue her and let her know like, hey, I'm interested, you know, in you. Where years ago when she was a teenager, she was about 16 at the time and he was like 22. She like had this little crush on him, and he was telling her like, you're too young for me. You know, you're too young for me. I think of you as like a little sister. And I was like, ooh, that's the blow that hurts. When you're like, I think of you as a little sister. Yikes. So it's like the kiss of death, you know? Same thing with like if a guy's like interested in a woman and she's like, I think of you as a brother. Ooh, right in the nuts. So like to me, it's like, it's kind of like the same thing with a girl, like, you know, her feelings and all that stuff, you know? So they've been friends for years, you know, friends and everything. And he's just like, oh, he's way into her. And to the point, like, even when he was younger and he thought she was really cute, his father, or her father, was like, dude, I know you're into my daughter. You need to wait. She's too young for you. You need to wait. Wait till she matures, you know, before you get together with her. You know, he goes, otherwise I'm going to come through the grave, because he was dying at the time. He goes, I'm going to come up from the grave and I'm going to haunt your ass, you know, basically, you know, like threaten him, you know. So he's basically, you know, Logan's in his head like, hey, you know, so-and-so. I think the father's name was Clyde. He goes, sorry, Clyde. He goes, it's time. He goes, I can't hold off anymore for her. She's going to try to get with this guy. He goes, hell no. I want her to be mine. So you would recognize Logan and Kelly from a previous book that Sloane St. James did. There was the book that was a part of the, I can't remember the name of the series, but it was basically a hockey series. And the one guy, he says his name in here and I completely forgot his name. But the guy in it was the 4th book, I think. I think it was 4 books in that series. Pretty sure it was 4 books in that series. And it was the last book in that series that had the 2 characters. Logan and Kelly were first introduced in that one. And you could tell, obviously, Logan was into her. Even his stepbrother was like, dude, when are you going to tap that? You know? And Logan just kept denying it, like, no, we're just friends. And so the other one's like, sure, you know? So, yeah, for me, I'm like, so far it's pretty good. I am enjoying it. And, oh yeah, there was another book by Sloane St. James this month that I tried reading and I wasn't into. I couldn't get into that one. But this one here, I am enjoying. And I do like that it's a tattoo shop and everything like that. I do like tattoos. I do love that creative thing, but I don't have tattoos, you know. I very much am like very picky, and I'm afraid if I get a tattoo, I'm going to hate it like within a month or 2 months. You know, I'm so finicky that I'm not sure if I could
get something permanent on my skin, you know? And then if you want to get it removed, you got to go and like get it lasered off. And I heard lasering is even more painful than getting that tattoo. And I'm like, do I want to fucking do that? Hell no. So, yeah. So for me, I'm like, you know, I don't know if I will ever get a tattoo. Maybe when I'm old and gray, you know, and I'm like, you know, I'm like ready for death. Maybe I'll be like, ah, fuck it, you know. Okay, now I can put a tattoo on myself, you know? So yeah, maybe then I'll be like, fuck it, you know? But right now I'm just kind of like, they're expensive, you know? You got to go to the right tattooist for you because you may not like this person's style. You got to like look at their portfolio and see like, is this a style you want to, you know, nail down on your skin permanently, you know? Like Pete Davidson had like all these really stupid tattoos. And he ended up getting like all this like laser surgery to get it off. And I'm like, good for him. He looks much better now without those stupid tattoos. But I'm like, to me, I don't know. It's got to like look nice in order for me to appreciate the tattoo. If it's some dumbass tattoo, I'm just kind of like, really? You did that to yourself? Okay. Same thing with piercings. I don't like all these piercings on people. Just, yeah, not into it. So anyways, that's it for this one here. February. February's always a quick month. It's always fast for me. You know, January always seems like it lasts forever. And then it's like January, and then it goes February, you know, and then you get to March. So that's pretty much how it is. But yeah, we'll see how March goes. I have a video coming out in March that's going to be more of, new series for me. I wanted to try out and see how that goes. I had put in my community tab. I put in my community tab that I was going to try out this new series. Well, I don't want to say what it is yet. I'll just let it post in March. But I'm going to start this new series, see how it goes over, if it goes over good or not. If not, like, if something doesn't go over well and I don't see a lot of people, like, responding to it, then I'm like, okay, obviously people are not interested in it. Then I don't want to keep going with it. I only keep going with something if people are interested in it, you know? Like, if people... I know, like, reviews, like, you know, when it comes to, like, book reviews, they're not very popular. I still like to do them, even though they're not very popular. People are more interested in drama or negativity. But I still like to do vlogs. But if it gets to the point where I'm like, people don't watch the vlogs and the views keep kind of going down and down and down, then I'm like, okay, people are not interested in these vlogs anymore. Then I would stop doing them. Same thing with, like, if I'm doing recommendation videos, and if I get to the point where there's a lot of people who aren't watching the recommendations videos, then I'd be like, okay, I'm not going to do them anymore, and kind of go from there. As it stands right now with my channel, next year, I may end up going down more with videos where I do even less. Because it's like, the way it is with YouTube, a lot of this is AI slop that ends up getting, like, taken over, and they don't recommend our videos anymore. And so I'm really not enjoying my experience on YouTube because of all this AI stuff, you know? And so I'm getting to the point where it's like, if nobody's watching the videos, what's the point of to keep doing this, you know? So I'm not asking for, like, millions of people to subscribe to me, but it's like, you still want to see growth. And when you don't see any growth on your channel and hardly anybody's commenting, and then you've got where there's barely anybody watching, maybe it's time to leave, you know? So next year, I might get it down to where maybe I'm only doing like 1 or 2 videos a month, you know? And then at that point, I have to decide whether or not I want to keep going, you know? So that's pretty much how it is right now. I'm hoping that some kind of competitor comes in and really kind of like gives a lot of competition for YouTube and all this other stuff, because I really think that this new person is not doing well and really is promoting like a lot of this AI crap, you know? I just don't like it. You know, I prefer to watch people authentically. I don't want to hear AI voices or AI content creators. I don't want that. I don't want AI. You know, I want real people that I can watch, you know, and consume. That's what I'm interested in. Otherwise, there's no point in being on here. So yeah, that's it for this one here. Let me know what you read this month that was maybe a favorite book of yours, or maybe is there something that you really disliked and you want to talk about it. Let me know. But yeah, that's it for this video here. Have yourselves a good day. Take care of yourselves, be kind to each other, and I'll see you all on the next video. All right, bye.